I'll just take you through what we do in eastern Nepal, and you know, we can answer some questions in the end here. A lot of people say, what's Z? What does Z stand for? There's these ancient Tibetan beads, and they're called dZi beads, dZi beads, and they're given from one person to another in the Himalayan region, and they bestow health and protection on the wearer. And that's what we try to do with our work in Nepal. I first went there in 1988 to climb Ahmed Ablam, this little mountain in Nepal. It's 22,500 feet. You know, we walked in on a Saturday, on a Sunday. 4 of us summited. We walked out the following Sunday. It was a really successful expedition. I thought I was the next coming, Reinhold Messner, and I got spanked on everything else I tried over there. And what it really turned out to be is there was a much higher calling for me. So we did the South Ridge up to the summit. Now, last time I was in base camp there, which was like 12 years ago, there were 17 teams in base camp, and we were the only 4 people on the mountain then. Things have changed a lot there. And so you can see Nepal here. You know, it's like the size of Tennessee. It's got roughly 30 million people living in there. It's compressed by China on one side, and you know, kind of keeps China out of their business because this Himalayan range, the geographic range, and you've got India, and all goods come out of India, and there's always a bit of tension between those two countries. Basically, the earthquake happened. India was trying to shove itself underneath China and on those 2 plates, and unfortunately, that didn't move all the distance that they thought it would. So there's still a fair amount of tension in those plates. But where we work, as you see Kathmandu here, we work directly south of Mount Everest. We don't work up in what's called the Everest region. We work down the very bottom of Solo district, and then we work down in Kotang and other areas known as Gudel, Boom, Sotang. Basically, no one goes out there. There's no trekking routes per se. Very, very adventurous people may be found in those areas. Quite often they're lost when they are found out there. Everything in these communities is carried on people's backs. Okay, there's no roads. You know, we can't helicopter in supplies because it's efficient. It's astronomically expensive. So even children are carried in baskets until they can walk on these trails. This would be considered I-70 of this area here. You know, it really is, and everything's on this network of trails in these areas. And where we work is a 2 to 5 day walk from the nearest road. All wood is cut in these communities for everyone to cook their own meals. All these terraces have been created by hand, all by oxen and plow. So generations and generations, and it's all subsistence farming in these communities, in these areas out here. And so this is a traditional Rai home. The area where we work has more Rai, R-A-I, people in these areas. And it could be Rai or cooling Rai, but these 3 stones in the center of their hearth is a little bit of a metaphor for how we do our work and how we enter in these communities. The first stone is that we never go anywhere we're not invited. There's a formal invitation by a county, so to speak. It's called a VDC, but as a county. And we want them to invite us in because we're going to ask them to do things to participate. This is not a program where we hand things out. It's a conversation between the community and Z. So we're invited in. The second stone represents that we never come in with a Western idea that we know what they need, and everybody needs X or everybody needs Y, and we're going to do it over a big geographic area. Not everybody needs a water product, not everybody needs a school, not everybody needs toilets. It's totally diverse, just like it is in Cortez or in my community in Ridgeway. So it's that self-determination that's really key, that they need to be involved so they can create their own ownership. And then the third stone is that we don't bring any volunteers in to do the work. The nonprofit world is littered with examples of volunteers and experts coming from different countries and doing the work. And as soon as it breaks, nobody knows how to fix it. The communities do all the work themselves. And to give you an idea, we've had that over 70,000 days of full labor donated by the community members in these communities. So it's really building their capacity also. So we start really small in these VDCs or in these counties, and in every single village. We have these meetings where we start to assess what's of highest need in their particular community. It's a little neighborhood, so to speak. And then we start to work with them, and there are staff members here that are working with these community members, teaching them how to write a proposal write a budget, figure out a timeline, talk about the community investment in this. So all these things start to build slowly because we're going to commit to these communities 8, 9, 10 years. We're around for a long time. So these small projects that we start, this is an example of what we call a block grant project. We give each of those neighborhoods or those villages $500. And this was built with $500. Looks like a really benign stream, but during the monsoon, it's class 6 whitewater for 3 or 4 months. And on the left, what we have is the village, but on the right, we've got another 100 homes. We've got kids over there. We've got access to health care across this bridge or river until the bridge was built. Also to markets. So this is an example of a $500 block grant as we start to build their capacity in these communities here. Another example would be, this is the building of a gravity-fed water system. There's lots of water in Nepal, but capturing it with fencing, so there's no animal or human waste, degrading that water, and then piping it down to different stands to where women and girls don't have to walk so far for water, which is a huge deal in all of the developing world for many, many reasons. We've built over 450 taps with our community partners in Nepal, serving over 6,000 people for fresh drinking water. We also want women to be involved in the pipe threading or wherever they can be involved and have a voice in these communities. Kids here, and what water brings into a community, obviously is clean drinking water, but the ability to have enough water to wash for hygiene. It also allows girls to stay at home more so they can study for their schooling. It allows women not to have to walk so far so they can have more of a voice in the community. The ramifications on all this stuff just really spill out over time. So also, bridges are a huge thing in these communities here. Here's a bridge that gets built every single year. Remember this cut piece of granite here. There's the cut piece of granite down there. Okay, that's where the bridge was. These are truss bridges that are built. We have 2 engineers on our staff that travel around as building inspectors and as engineers. And these truss bridges come in on people's backs, so we're able to provide this to where everybody can get to health care again, all those things that are so important in these areas. Or just going to get fodder for the animals in the morning, as an example. Irrigation ditches here being built so we can get water access to new fields. We've opened up over 300 acres of fields where there's thousands of people benefiting from that acreage with fresh crops and those types of things. And what I want to stress is also that everything is carried in on people's backs. This is irrigation pipe. I think it came in 4 days. There were like 25 pieces. So it gets carried by one person for 4 days. So a lot of sweat equity in these projects. Here's piping for a water project going across a suspension bridge. This is roofing tin and piping for toilets coming into these communities. And toilets will just take, we've built over 3,600 toilets in these communities. And really, we've been able to improve the diarrheal disease in these communities by over 50% because of these types of toilets here. And so the toilets, and I'll take a step back. We start these communities, these organizations in these small villages, and at the end of the year, out of that whole county, there's an NGO, a non-governmental organization that has a board, and the best and the brightest bubble up. And then after that first year, what happens is that NGO, that group of people, they're responsible for running these much bigger projects. This project in Goodell had 900 toilets. So just imagine from Kathmandu, 2,700 pieces of roofing tin getting transported all the way out into those communities and getting distributed into that. A lot of major logistics in this. So for this particular project, each house had to build the stone building, and there's no floor in it, and then they were required to dig a 4-meter hole that's long and narrow, line it with rocks, because the effluent's going to go into that, okay? And then at that time, they get the piping, they get a toilet pan, they get the roofing, and a bag of concrete to plaster that. So now all that logistics is organized by the NGO that we formed in that community. I mean, I'm not sure in Goodell, but I think it's called the Creative Porter Society. So it's all run by Nepalis, building Nepali capacity, okay? And just so you know, kind of our footprint, in Ridgeway we have 2 full-time, I'm one of them, and 2 part-time people. That's it on the state side. And we've been there for 19 years working in Nepal. But in Nepal, we have 26 staff, 1 American and 25 Nepalis. And I digress. We've got a couple of, one of our staff here. This is Hema Rai from our staff in Kathmandu. She's our communications, our evaluation outreach officer. Her title's changed. So she's been with us for a number of years in Kathmandu. And then we have Julia Van Raalte. She was just an intern for 6 months. And awesome asset for us in Kathmandu. Don't get your hopes up. You got to speak Nepali to get an intern job. That's the deal. That's the deal. So she speaks fluent Nepali, and of course Hema also. But they're along with us here. So, anyways, going back to toilets. So there's these toilets built, and you can see the toilets here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Where is it? 5. One in this, and this is a traditional Rai village here, where they kind of cluster their houses, and then the crops are on the outside there. And then our model for development, we call this deep development, because none of this stuff ever is singular. It always stacks or scaffolds up. So we heard about, out of Europe, the capturing of urine to use for fertilizer. We were like, wow, we ought to be able to do that. And realize these places are so far out, they're already organic. I mean, there's no chemicals being carried out and all this. But we started to build these toilet pans where they're tapered and the solid goes to the back, and we brought water to the community, so you wash the effluent down into that big cavity, right? But then what's going to happen is the pee and the urine goes to the front, and then it gets captured over in the tank here, okay? And it's got a spigot. It off-gases, it's diluted, and this is not something that we brought up. In Europe, first off, they have whole neighborhoods that are all plumbed like this to go to tankers to be used in commercial crops, okay? And this is also sanctioned by the WHO, the World Health Organization. There's a number of barriers that have to be in place, but, you know, one of the biggest barriers initially was cultural appropriateness. This is like people there in Nepal that are like, you're kidding, we're going to use urine for our crops, you know? So we had to do a bunch of trainings, and the first community that we went into, half the people used this because they wanted to use the fertilizer and they thought it would work. And now 100% of anybody that gets these new toilets, they want the EcoSan because they understand what happens, and it's boosted crops by a considerable amount. So this is what's called sabji. It's used in their dal bhat, in their daily meals. This is sabji that's growing in a plot right next to another crop of sabji, and this has had urine placed all around it. The crops come out of the ground much faster, the pests can't get to them. It's been a huge, huge deal. And you can see the tomatoes that an Italian would love to have his hands on in these communities. And then this whole project got picked up by Scientific American and was a big feather in our cap about what goes on in these communities where we work. So that was a great deal. So we've got water, now we've got toilets, okay, and it increases yield in agriculture. So all these things have a way of scaffolding up. It's not that one project over a huge geographic region that's going to change people's lives. You know, there's more to it. So cauliflower in these communities, food security, food diversity is a huge deal out in these areas. Peaches, all sorts of fruits. There's kiwis now that we brought in and are growing in these communities here. This is a hothouse, so they call it a hoop house. We would think of the green, this guy's name is Shiva Rai. There's drip irrigation system. These are all tomatoes, okay? Unbelievable in these areas. And also water into what we call kitchen gardens, where a family can have much more robust garden at their house, where they're able to add this to all of their meals. So it is all around health, food security, all these things. And agriculture is a big component of it. We do a lot of things. Let me see if I can get this to work. Oh, you can read the text. You turn that up?
आफूलाई खाएको नै मलाई चाहिँ एकदम मूल्याङ्कन गर्छ आफूलाई गाजर खाएपछि मलाई आँखाले पनि देखे मलाई साँच्चै नै चाहिँ एकदम जरा फुर्तिला पनि भयो जस्तो लाग्यो मलाई गाजर पहिले मलाई मन परेन पछि चाहिँ मलाई भोक लाग्यो कि आएर गाजर आफै खाइदिने पछि त मैले आँखा नै देख्न थालेँ पहिले गाजर खाएपछि आँखाले देख्छ भन्ने चाहिँ सुनेको थिएँ तर मैले खाएको थिएन पर रोपेर अहिले पहिले चाहिँ मलाई खाँदा मन परेन पछि त मलाई एकदम
And it's really interesting. These people are so close to the land. I mean, they are integral and they're organic and they're sustainable, and there's a lot to learn from them, not just what we have to offer. I want to talk a little bit about the earthquake because you guys were supporting that. The first earthquake happened 2 years ago now. On April 25th, everything was kind of starting to get together, and I'm sure Hema can attest. They were like writing their new project agreement with our Social Welfare Council in Nepal, and then the May earthquake hit just a little bit over 2 weeks later. So basically, this is about 120 miles from the project areas. It kind of shook everything, and this brought down a lot of things. One of the best things that happened around the earthquake is April 25th was a holiday, and May 12th was a weekend. No kids were in schools. Thousands of children probably would have been killed because of these schools falling down and how haphazardly they're built. So we lost 90% of the schools in our communities. Buildings like this, lots of fires in conjunction with these buildings being destroyed. These are all in our project areas out there. Schools, this is a shed for storing grains. Schools here. So we did exactly what we've always done. We went back to the community and assessed in 69 community meetings what's of most importance for you. We certainly have our ideas, and it basically went into 3 things. One, getting major tarps into the communities, and we moved those out of India and Kathmandu that were able to get over 12,000 people covered because they were staring down the monsoon, 3-4 months of rain. So that was the first thing that happened. These tarps were distributed to these communities. 3,000 families and basically about 12,000 people, about 4 people in the household. And so a lot of people just lived under tarps through the monsoon. The second thing they said wasn't that we want to repair our homes. We want to get our kids back in school because education is going to be the way that they're to a better life. Same things that parents think around here, driving kids in school. So hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces of roofing tin in these really comfortable loads were carried into our project areas. Then these bamboo structures were being built. So there's 40 TLCs, temporary learning centers, that were being built. And you can see the monsoons there, and then a nice day. So they got these TLCs built, and we had kids back in school and up and running. The benches were salvaged from the schools and really got things going. And so we had to commit to 28 schools over the next 3 years, okay? And so this is just a picture of one of our earthquake-resistant schools. It has bond beams in here, and only 2 of all the schools that we had built had seen minor damage. So I'm going to take a quick step back because what happened is during the monsoon, the government got all ginned up and said, oh, we need to build more earthquake-resistant buildings. Well, we were already doing that, okay? And so they put all these restrictions on. So for the first year, we were basically able to build the older style with stone and rebar and timber. And then I'll take you to those 2 cycle periods because they pulled a fast one on us at the end of that first year too. So it's always challenging in Nepal, and we have to be very nimble and reactive to that. So there's no backhoes to dig foundations out here, okay? And the stones get carried in on people's backs to the community and their quarry. And then all the women sit around with hammers and basically break rocks into gravel because we've got to pour concrete. And the sand comes from the valley floor, 3,000 feet down. So a lot of work, and the concrete comes from Kathmandu and is either carried in on mules or on people's backs.
It took the last hour to sharpen the blade, and now they're back at cutting this huge log in half, make it a little bit more manageable to work with.
There's a closed-toe policy there.
So I took this video, and this is probably, took an hour and 20 minutes to cut through that log. So everything is managed by all the people in the communities, and they have a forestry management committee, but there's no Lowe's or Home Depot to go to. It's intense work. And then all that lumber is carried down by individuals in the community as local contribution. And this is rebar, all bent and folded up and carried from the trailhead. All right? And then it's got to be straight. It's got to be super straight, so that wrapped up. So this is a school, and we started to build schools in 2 classroom pods instead of long classrooms with 6 or 7 or 8 classrooms. Much easier for an earthquake to tear that apart. So 2 classroom pods. Now, so this is a project site, and I'll just walk you through kind of what's going on. Let's see if this... So here's all the rebar that came in, and they're straightening it and that and bending it. All the stones that have been carried in, dropped in over by the women. That's a bag of concrete coming down. And this is the project area for those 2 classrooms. Another bag of concrete. There's gravel and sand stored on the side. We've got these buttresses being built here. You can see all these buttresses in the corners of the school where they're much, much stronger. So we're trying to build, and this is all our design.
So Jim, are these paid laborers, or are these all the family members from the community are paid laborers, or?
We have skilled masons and carpenters to direct the community because we want to ensure quality. But the vast majority of this is local contribution with these folks. People are carrying over bags of concrete. And you see these guys walking out? That's a box they've built. So they measure the gravel in the appropriate size for a bag of concrete. And they have another box that they measure the sand. We don't want this to happen haphazardly. We want a specific amount. And then you can see that they just mix it up on a couple of sheets of roofing tin and carry it over. What's the one thing you don't see in the picture? What?
Hard hats, the steel-toed boots.
Heavy machinery.
Badeshis, foreigners. It's all locals doing this. It's all building the local. You know, it's all the capacity. So, and you can see how straight that rebar had to be, you know, in order for that. So these are these buttresses, and this is the first year after the earthquake that we were building these schools. You can see the bond beam down here, and then it's poured and it's wrapped and super strong. And we're using mud mortar in here. And then you can see all this. This is all just done with hand saws and string and line. I mean, it's really impressive. And so then you can see these roof trusses, and you can see how everything was built. So, super strong. We did this on our own, got it approved by the Department of Education. We were way ahead of the curve on all this. And you can see the classroom here. And this is what it ended up. 2 classroom pod, the buttresses, metal posts, super strong. Well, that was the first year after the earthquake. The government said you have to build all the buildings with concrete mortar in between here. And that jacked the price of the schools up by 40%. So we went back to the drawing board and we went with a completely new design where we've just completed 8 of those schools this year. So this is in Kathmandu, and these are metal studs. Anybody been like in Denver or anywhere you see those metal studs? That's what we're going to take. That's where we're taking this now. So this is in Kathmandu. Again, it's all being carried in on people's backs. I was really thinking about Osprey, and if you guys could design something for these folks. You like this lumbar support here for these trusses here?
Maybe they can teach us.
Yeah. Well, they're all using tump lines.
Yeah.
It's all tump lines. So it's you know, the neck becomes head becomes a muscle from the early ages. So just remarkable stuff what they're carrying in these communities. And then so this is all of these panels. They're like 3 feet wide, 6.5 feet tall, and they're carried in. These are all on edge being stored at this spot. And then the community starts to build a 2 classroom pod here by clearing the land. And you can see we're dealing with a much lighter foundation because it doesn't have to carry all those stones and rebar, all that. It's all about building. When we see these huge houses, it's about how light you can make things. And so this is the foundation being built. And then we bring this up out of the ground with concrete mortar like 18 inches. And then pour the floors. And then you can start to see these walls go up with a strapping for keep things square. And it's all put together with battery operated drills and screws that are solar charged out in these communities.
What happens if someone gets injured on the job site?
Well, we do our best to take care of them, you know, and then there's access to health care and that, but we don't have there's not an insurance possibly, but
Right.
we do whatever we can to certainly make sure. I don't know if anybody has been hurt seriously on these jobs, you know. We certainly have twisted ankles and smashed toes because of rocks and things like that, but I haven't heard of anything radical, where someone's lost their life on our job, or serious broken bones or anything like that. But yeah, that's something we need to be responsible for, you know. And we certainly try to keep people safe and not to have people getting too crazy about being up on buildings and that. So yeah. So then you can start to see these roof trusses in these schools. These headers are built. They would support Snow and Mountain Village over in Telluride. They're so strong. So these are these communities. And then you can see the overhang here, and this is again just a 2 classroom pod being built in these areas.
Any reaction to these newer materials coming in and how it shapes their environment?
Yeah, not so much that it shapes it in a bad way. They just don't know how to work with it, and so there's a lot of training that comes up with that. They're totally psyched that there's a new style of construction, and that one of the things that's really cool about these buildings is when, not if, when the next earthquake comes, they'll bend, much more than collapse, okay? And heavy roof trusses, okay? So again, holding true to that. And then sheeted on the outside with metal, the immense amount of rains. Inside are wood, plywood, skylights. This is what this new construction looks like here. Solid posts that they don't rot out with the monsoon. And then I'll talk about financial transparency. In all projects in Nepal, we have this big vinyl sheet with grease pencils. And every bag of concrete, piece of roofing tin, piping that comes into the community is tracked. All the skilled masons and the carpenters, their wages are tracked, okay? And this isn't a public, there's a little metal roof, corrugated roof over this. It's always up. And that NGO that we formed, they basically changed those numbers. And then at the end of that project, with the help of our staff that live out in those communities, there's what's called a public audit. And we can have anywhere from 50 to 500 people show up. And they can ask any question of that NGO that's been formed. What about those 3 bags of concrete that went over the hill to Chachalun? Or that 2 pieces of roofing tin that went over the hill? What's the story with that? And until everybody in the community is satisfied, they don't sign off. And then once they sign off, they put their mark or their signature in black magic marker around that, and it goes back to Kathmandu. So that's the village transparency on this side. And then on the U.S. side, even though we're in Ridgeway and we run a budget of $1.3 million and serve 40,000 people, we do an audit that costs us 20 grand a year. And it makes us a much better organization. We're audited by a firm out of Washington, D.C., and they audit 300 nonprofits globally. And they come to our office in Ridgeway and crawl into all, I mean, it makes us a much better organization. We're much tighter because of that. I might say this also, any nonprofit in Colorado, no matter how much money you raise, you don't have to do an audit. It's not a requirement. It's totally voluntary. So we do it because it makes us a better organization. So, and then we obviously report that to the IRS. So financial transparency all the way through. And then we've had a lot of great PR over the years. Rocky Mountain PBS last year. Bloomberg did an 8-page story on us after the earthquake. Year after the earthquake, PBS NewsHour showing the schools. And then the common denominator, whether the kids in Chachalun, Goodell, wherever they are, or Ridgeway or Cortez, parents want a better life for their kids. And that's really what it comes down to. They are the future change agents for everybody, whether here or there. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys about the dZi Foundation.